Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers.
Splash move, I would say. I don't know who upped the money for them, but I don't think Dean Spanos was in charge of hiring this guy because it would have never happened. What's
What's going on, dude?
happening? So, not the outcome that we wanted for the Super Bowl
Or
matchup.
seriously, or like 99% of America or whatever.
Seriously, Lions Ravens would have been so much more fun. I would have been way more excited this whole like week or two, addressing that matchup, all the hype around the Lions, Lamar's first Super Bowl, all this stuff. And instead, we just have the 2020 redo of the Red Bowl
That no one is excited about.
that no one's excited about unless you're a Niners or Chiefs fan.
Exactly.
All things being considered, all of our teams aren't there and they all were in the playoffs. So that's like another bummer, but whatever.
Glad I didn't bet on the Lions, but they had it
They
for,
did,
and they
dude.
did.
24-7.
Should we just get into that game first?
Yeah, let's do it.
They,
Such a bummer.
what, they get up to 14, 17 point lead or something like that
I think it was 24-7 or 24-10.
at halftime.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second half comes around.
They were driving and then that one dropped pass kind of started it all. It was like a low reach out one.
Even just going
Yeah.
more into that, it was the fact that it was fourth down and that he went for it. They were
Yeah.
too aggressive.
Yeah. And then he did go for it again later and he could have kicked the field goal and then only needed to score a touchdown to tie instead of having to score and then
Yeah.
get the ball back. That's their MO though. That's how they played all year.
And then the 49ers, I think it said on like all six possessions in the second half, they scored.
Yeah. It was just like you couldn't stop it. Everybody knew it was happening, but that you couldn't stop it. And then all the Lions fans were just like, oh, like it's just the same old crap over and over again.
Yeah, I was gonna brush off that fourth down, and then they scored. But then right after they score, remember, then Lions come back, and then Jameer Gibbs fumbles.
Yeah, right away. It's like the first
Yeah,
play of the drive. Yeah.
right at that point, then I was like, I didn't want to say it was over, but they lost all the momentum right there.
Yeah. Congrats to 49ers. They have a super stacked team. We'll see. I don't know. They struggled in both their games. Chiefs aren't what they used to be, but they keep figuring out ways to win. They only had to score 17 points in Baltimore to win.
Crazy thing about that game, obviously, was Ravens being like the number one or one of the top rushing teams all year, and then running back carries for that game was six total.
Yeah. They had like less than 50 yards combined. They had two turnovers in the end zone, basically.
So it
Zay
was really
Flowers
bad.
showboating, taunting call,
Yeah.
and then he about to score and he fumbles on the one, and
Yeah.
then Lamar throws in the triple coverage
Yeah, that was bad.
zone. That was bad. They had chances to get back in that game. I think KC is beatable. The Bills didn't play that well of a game and were still only lost by whatever, 3 or 7 or something. I don't have a pick so far. I think both teams really haven't played that great in the postseason. They've been able to get wins, but I think it'll come down to who has a better second half, it seems like, in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And for as much as KC continues to get by, like we said, I think we do have to give more credit still to Mahomes and Andy Reid as much as we
Don't want to.
exactly, yeah. Just there's a reason why they're in the Super Bowl, what, four of the last 5 years or something like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Mahomes, yeah, he's the great equalizer. Me and Caleb just talked about it briefly. We're saying if anybody can do it against the Ravens team, it's Mahomes. And I guess I mean, and even away, didn't seem to phase them too much. Mahomes to Kelsey.
Kelsey was on fire the whole game. They just choked. They looked like how the Ravens looked in their other playoff games, like not the Texans game. The Texans game, they looked like, oh, okay, maybe this Lamar's for real. But these last couple years, they've looked like that. And they just can't put up any points, and Lamar has a bunch of turnovers.
Lamar has definitely got a lot better at throwing, but I still think sometimes they do struggle to play catch up like that. Obviously, when they're ahead, when they're at their best, they're running, using up the game clock, just playing time of possession, run the ball. But then when they're in panic mode, having to throw a lot, that's when it comes back to bite them a lot. And then one last thing for KC, they do have a really solid defense, better than other years. So I think that's kind of making up the difference for maybe a slight decline in some of the Chiefs' offensive production and like the receiver side.
We'll see.
I don't
Red
have
Bull Part 2, 4 years later.
God, I don't have a pick either. I don't. The 49ers, all they do is talk shit about the Eagles. The Chiefs, I want to see Andy Reid win another one. He beat us last year, so I'm really like in a pickle. I just want
Yeah,
both of them to lose somehow.
I know. Can it end in a tie? Guess not. Let's get into some other news. We'll save our Super Bowl preview for next week. A couple head coaching
Some
hires.
moves. Yeah, let's talk about these, especially the first one. I want to hear your thoughts. Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers.
Splash move, I would say. I don't know who upped the money for them, but I don't think Dean Spanos was in charge of hiring this guy because it would have never happened. But we talked about the Chargers getting Harbaugh and a change of culture very much needed there. They'll always be the second team until they win something, they'll always be the Clippers of the NFL in LA. So I think that was a great move to hire Harbaugh. He's red hot right now. He clearly has a fire in him to get back to the Super Bowl and win.
I like your Clippers reference. I agree with that. I feel like him coming here now is going to finally take them out of that conversation. We'll see. But
Yeah,
slowly but surely,
yeah.
give them a new identity, a toughness factor.
I mean, he's got to be stoked. You're walking into a lot of good players. You're starting with Herbert. You can't be upset about that.
He played for the Los Angeles Chargers way back when.
Yep.
So homecoming. But happy for the Chargers.
I am happy for the Chargers for sure. I would like to see them succeed. As much as I have resentment towards them for leaving San Diego, there's still a small part of me that's like, you don't want to.
See them crash and
It's
burn.
hard. It's hard to base a feeling on them when they aren't related to me anymore. But I still do live in Southern California. They only moved 90 miles away. It's not like it was they moved
Yeah.
to Indianapolis or anything. Still a ton of Chargers fans in San Diego. My dad's still a Chargers fan. Been one for 50 years. He's not going to stop now. So he was excited for sure, and I'm excited through him. The division
Yeah.
is open.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have the Chiefs, but a lot of other question marks with the Raiders and Broncos.
And speaking of the Raiders, so they had made it official. Antonio Pierce, head coach now. I think Max Crosby at one point he said he was going to put in a trade request if they did not keep Antonio Pierce as the head coach.
Yeah, Davis did not make the same mistake as not hiring Bisaccia a couple years ago when he was interim.
And then just the one interesting note, just tying it back again to the Chargers, who we were just talking about, they signed Tom Telesco, former
Yeah,
Chargers GM for like 10 years. Is going straight to Vegas now as their GM. Interesting.
yeah. I don't necessarily hate that move. Tom Telesco brought a lot of talent to the Chargers over the last 10 years. Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon, Joey Bosa, Herbert, Derwin James. Like, there's a lot
Yeah,
of good players he drafted for sure, Mike Williams. A couple duds for
that's
sure.
but that's everybody.
But that happens to everyone. But a lot of good talent he's brought in. Like Keenan Allen was like a third round pick. Obviously, the guy is good at evaluating talent. Whether they can put it all together is something else. He's very familiar with the division already. I think that's a
Mm,
bonus. So
good point.
happy for him.
And he's got the experience. They said that was the biggest thing, just to pair with Antonio Pierce, who obviously has a not as much
Yeah,
experience. But
yeah.
moving over to a few other teams. So the
Falcons
Falcons,
interviewed a million people.
they interviewed like 15 plus people, including giving like Bill Belichick a second interview, but they settle on Raheem Morris, formerly Rams DC.
Yeah. Interesting move. I think they want to go young and chase the Sean McVay factor, Mike McDaniels, whatever thing. Clearly, Raheem Morris, I think, was a part of that Redskins staff that now there's like 7 people are all head coaches.
Mm,
And by the way, that team was terrible. They were like 3-13, that Redskins
you're
team.
totally right. Yeah, it's
So
almost hard
it's
to
kind of
believe.
funny that all these guys are now getting jobs or whatever, and a couple of ones in the Super Bowl right now with Kyle Shanahan. McVay has been there a couple times and won one. LaFleur made it to the playoffs this year. It's just interesting little tree of coaches that have come out of that very terrible Redskins team. So
Yeah, and ironically, although they didn't come from his tree, they were, I believe Jay Gruden was the head coach.
he
Kind of ironic.
was.
He doesn't have a job, and
Well, would you want to hire Jay Gruden right now? He wouldn't be at the top of my list. That's just me
uh,
personally.
especially with him arguing over X with Robert Griffin. Sorry, one last thing about the Falcons. Just
Yeah, go
today,
for it.
looks like Steelers just hired our favorite coach, Artie Smith, to be their OC. So
Wow.
early fantasy nugget. Forget any of your Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, George Pickens.
Do not draft any Pittsburgh players, but if your name is Wade, go for it.
Just draft their backups.
Yeah, draft their backups and see them just do so well.
Yeah,
A
it's
couple
gonna
other head coaching hires. Patriots promoted Gerard Mayo to head coach.
yeah, so that'll be a big change, obviously, from Bill Belichick now. It's a new era in New England.
Very interesting. Do we think Belichick just retires? Do we think he gets a job somewhere?
Did you see the crazy rumor that they had said on X? He might,
No.
if Andy Reid were to win and then
Oh
possibly
yeah.
retire, Belichick plus
Belichick
Mahomes.
just slide right in there. It's like that Dave Chappelle meme, like, hey, you got any more Super Bowl rings? You want any more Super Bowl rings? I got a nice Patrick Mahomes
Yeah,
here ready for a coach.
exactly.
Wow. That would be something else.
But yeah, it looks like he's not going to sign. The only teams left is the Commanders and the Seahawks, and I think they're both looking at assistance on the most recent teams that had lost, or like the
Okay.
Ravens and the Lions. Anything else you want?
Titans hired Brian Callahan, the Bengals offensive coordinator, after firing Vrabel.
Vrabel also question mark.
Still no job. I would be calling that guy.
Panthers hired Dave Canales. He was the Buccaneers OC. He did good work with Geno Smith when he was in Seattle, and then Baker Mayfield this past year.
Okay.
They
Maybe
think
he can help right the ship for Bryce. Okay, that's an interesting story to follow up with next year.
one more
Works
note
out.
about that. I saw an ex David Tepper, the Panthers owner. He basically owes their last three coaches for the next 3 years. So Frank Reich and Matt Rule, who was before him, he still has 3 more years left on his contract. And now this new coach, who he just
Didn't
gave
he
a,
just hire Frank Wright?
yeah. So that's why Frank Reich has 3 more years. And now this guy, he gave a 6 year contract.
Oh my God.
So
Dude, this guy. You got 3 coaches on the staff.
for the
You're
next three
paying.
years,
Yikes. I mean, that kind of sounds like the Raiders. Aren't the Raiders still paying Gruden?
something like that, yeah. I mean, David
Yeah,
Tepper also makes like 20 billion, his net worth, so
I guess it doesn't matter, but
yeah, but
man,
pretty wild though.
pretty stupid. And then your Eagles have
As a
a
court,
couple new coordinators. Let's see how you feel about that.
as we saw, the experience or lack of experience did not pay off this year, and we saw the definite drop off. As much as we wanted to make fun of Jonathan Gannon, all
Yeah,
year, the Arizona Shane Steichen did pretty well with the Colts this past year, but it made a huge difference. And Matt Patricia obviously was a mess. And then the OC it was just very bland. Just need to be more creative. I know Caleb is hating on the Kellen Moore, but we'll see. I think it will bring some freshness to the team, honestly, because he does more motion. Our offense does no motion.
interesting. Okay. Well, that's got to be different for sure.
And then Fangio, yeah, on defense, just solid experience.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
that's great hire.
they brought in the Seahawks defensive coordinator who was fired because of Pete Carroll to be like D-line coach now. That's cool
Oh,
with me,
nice.
like
Yeah, you got some real experience in there. We will see how the offense does under Kellen Moore.
feels weird saying that.
Yeah, very interesting. Caleb really, really hated him, but maybe that's turning out to just be the hot and coldness of Dak is maybe more contributing to that. You never know kind of which Dak you're gonna get.
Yeah. It said the
So
Chargers were gonna keep him, but because Jim Harbaugh got hired, then
yeah, whatever. Let
he
him
could
take a
leave.
job somewhere else. I think the Eagles would like to keep these guys longer than just a year. I think you need some consistency at these positions. You don't want to have Jalen going through five different coordinators in 5 years or something like that, you know?
Seriously.
That
Yeah.
just sounds like terrible. How many new plays are you going to have to learn? Play calls, the way to call it. It always seems like teams that have had the same people for a while were consistent. Like all those years that the Patriots had McDaniels, they were good. But then anytime he went to try to go be a head coach, it was terrible.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
you're 100% on that with
Some people are
Jalen
just good quarter coordinators.
because he came in with Doug Peterson as coach and a different OC.
Yeah, it's been different every year. So he's got
Steichen,
to
yeah.
be a little annoyed with that. So
Even in
either,
college, he
yeah,
had Alabama OC, then Oklahoma. So
yeah, we'll see. Very interesting.
one last note, how about your team? I saw today, looks like you're retaining all of your coaches. That's huge because it looked like Bobby Slowick, the OC, was interviewing, but he chose to stay.
Yeah,
So
that's a huge call. He definitely, I think, interviewed with a couple people. People were looking at him to move on, but I really like what he's been doing. Aside from the game against Baltimore when the offense couldn't really get going, but if you continue like what you said, build that with CJ, immediately they already are locking in for a second year together. So that's got to be good. Build some chemistry. We get Tank Dell back, be huge. Robert Woods is a very quiet on the field player, but I'm sure a very vocal Rajon Rondo type of veteran to be in that wide receiver room that I really like too. It just seems like D'Amico did that with a couple of guys and got some vets in there that were like maybe towards the tail end of their careers, but if you're going to have a young team like that, you need good veteran presence to establish
yeah,
routines and things like that, day-to-day things. This is how you be a football player in the NFL.
yeah, I think it was really smart on his part. Just build that chemistry. It's great for CJ too. Imagine if he had, just switch to a new OC his second year again, like we were just saying with
Exactly.
Jalen. So
Yeah,
he,
exactly.
Slowick, I feel like we get like 6, 7 coaches fired every year. He has another solid year. He'll be up for a head coach next year.
Probably if they have another good year. Yeah.
This is the year though that I feel like you guys or off season, I think for Texans, I'm not sure what your salary cap is, but I feel like you should dip into that because you have CJ on that rookie deal. So now start getting all
That's
the
yeah.
build the team around. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I don't really know what moves they need to make yet. I haven't done a full dive into their roster since the playoff loss, but obviously I think another receiver would be good. Noah Brown was like our second leading receiver and everything. Not that there's anything wrong with Noah Brown, but just stuff like that. But I want to keep continuing to develop our young players too. Like the problems that you talked about in Philadelphia, like they're not the Packers were very young and they just, well, this is who we got. We're all going to be young together. Let's
Hmm.
not pay Julio Jones to come in and catch a ball every
And
now and
yeah,
let's
take somebody else's spot. Exactly.
yeah. So I think if they stick with that mentality moving forward, they'll be well again. What do you think, looking after a couple weeks now removed from the Eagles game, what stands out to you the most of what needs to make a change for the Eagles going into next year? They already have a couple new coordinators now, but what do you think needs to make a change there?
I do think the coordinator thing was a big deal. So that will be a drastic change for the better, in my opinion. I just think more accountability just as a whole on the as a team and just getting back to like rebuilding that locker room because it just seemed like they weren't together and they weren't playing as a team. Ray Lewis had mentioned it when in our last playoff game against the Bucks, just the way they were missing the tackles. It made a lot of sense the way he said they're not playing like a team in the sense that even when they're trying to tackle and do the angles, they're not even setting up another player, like if they miss to make the tackle. It's just all playing individually. And that's why
Yeah,
they miss one misses the tackle, he's out of position. The next guy misses the tackle, he's out. They're not helping each other. So
yeah. Totally. We gotta, I don't know if that's on Sirianni or not, but he's gotta preach togetherness a little bit more. And I feel like it really showed those last 6 weeks for the Eagles when they were struggling that it was more like, well, can Jalen just get it done by himself? Or, like AJ Brown deleting the Eagle
Social
stuff
media.
on his Twitter or whatever, like forget about all that. Like, let's just win as a team. Let's be a team. Let's win as a team.
Exactly. 100%.
I think out of all these new head coaches, obviously Jim Harbaugh is the sexiest, most splash hire. But I think the Raiders keeping Pierce is a solid move. I think a lot of people like that don't get a chance to run it back after being an interim. So hats off to Mark Davis for deciding or owning up to his mistake last time and not hiring Bisaccia and saying, "Hey guys, like I'm really listening. Josh McDaniels was not the answer here. Like let's get somebody, and we already have a guy. Let's stick with him."
It was definitely in years past a not Raiders move. They go for the
Yes.
sexy name. And
Especially after moving to Vegas and they got Gruden and Mayock and all these people, they wanted to be a big franchise. Like that doesn't have to be who they are. They got fans from all over the world. They just got to play Raider football again. I feel like they kind of got away from that a little bit.
and I think having seen Dan Campbell and your D'Amico Ryans this year, just slightly more like, leader of men having that mentality too. I think that also he saw that in Antonio Pierce.
Absolutely. And I feel like that style of coach is going to continue to grow in the NFL. A man of the people or something like that. Not afraid to tell you exactly how it is rather than, the old school, you're not going to get a real answer from me, Belichick type of thing. What do you
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
about Dan Campbell in his press conference saying that it's going to be hard to get back here? Initial thoughts as we finish up here.
When I first saw it just as a headline, I got a negative reaction. But when I
Same.
listened to the whole thing, when you see the whole thing, then it makes more sense. And I understand he's just being very raw and being very honest. And I think I understand it. It's like he's right. You're not going to be the same team. Some coaches are going to be different. Definitely not all the same players.
No,
So it's just, you're gonna have to rebuild that whole, not rebuild, but rebuild that chemistry within the team. So I could understand it. But what did you think?
I think people don't realize how emotional and just kind of raw he is, especially like newer Lions fans, or not newer Lions fans, but people that were kind of bandwagoning them into the playoffs as the underdog. I was rooting for him. You were.
Yeah,
It's a great story. So I think like you said, that quote taken out of context, it hurts a little more. And I think he was just, not feeling good in the moment
yeah,
of that gut wrenching loss. He kind of speaks the truth. It is going to be hard to get back there. It's hard to get to the NFC championship for anybody. You got to have a great season, great couple playoff games, whatever. I think he thinks that they can get back there. I think he was just being honest in the moment, saying it's going to be a lot of work to get back here. And yeah, you can do whatever with your expectations, but we are still the Lions.
exactly. And obviously you can only control what you control, but he also did mention like, yeah, other teams are going to get better. Packers are going to
Yeah,
get even better. So
absolutely. All those
I,
teams that had early exits, they're going to be hungry to get back. The Eagles are going to be hungry. The Cowboys are
yeah,
going to be hungry. The Packers are going to be hungry. Look
yeah.
at what they can build
Mhm.
on, and all the other teams that just didn't make it.
Yeah, I
There's
think
always a few teams that don't make it that made it the year before.
exactly.
There's always a lot of parity in
And
the
then
NFL.
free agency, like the Eagles lost last year, and then they're gonna have
Yeah.
that. I don't know about how much more they have Goff, but obviously they drafted really well this year, so they're
Yeah,
set up
Gibbs
pretty
was
well.
an immediate contribution. Yeah, he had that fumble, but I'm not sure they would have won as many games without him.
Laporta,
Laporta huge, yeah. So I think they keep building on that. I think they make the playoffs again next year for sure.
yeah, oh definitely,
So yeah, you said we still have Seahawks still don't have a coach,
and Commanders.
and the Commanders, which is interesting. You could not, I don't know. Would you take that job? If you had a chance, I mean, how
Uh,
do you say no to NFL
yeah,
coaching job? There's only 32
yeah.
positions in the world,
I
but
mean, now that Dan Schneider's not owner, I would take it.
yeah, I
Um,
say we change the name for reals this time, and then we start there, and then let's move on. Then you got me on board. Any other thoughts on conference championship weekend? Think we didn't get the results that we wanted. They were decent games. They weren't great games. They were decent games. But I feel like honestly, the first round of the playoffs, the wild card weekend, was the most exciting in terms of games. Kind of an okay Super Bowl to look forward to, but it's what it is.
at least we know the NFL, I guess, isn't rigged, at least this year, because the Super Bowl logo scheme, was purple red, and we got two red teams. So there you go. Green and purple next year. I was hoping for the Eagles.
We'll see.
Yeah,
We'll
we'll
see. I
see.
just saw a thing that Kirk Cousins wants $90 million for 2 years. So good luck,
If
Viking.
he didn't have enough money already, as it
Exactly.